Hello.
Hey, Bryan.
How's it going, Chuck?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, pretty good. How's everyone doing out there on the internet in general out there? Hope everyone is having a
Staying
good,
safe.
lovely day.
Yeah. Yeah. Good to
I'll
good to
say
see.
it is very cold where I'm at.
Ooh, how
It
cold is it?
was 7 degrees Fahrenheit this morning when I take my son to the bus stop, and it's that type of cold that when you breathe in, it legitimately hurts your lungs.
Hmm.
And I had this vision. If you're familiar with the movie The Day After Tomorrow, it's a terrible, terrible disaster movie about the impact of climate change. And this was like a decade and a half ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a scene, a helicopter goes down because its fuel line freezes up in the cold. The helicopter crashes. They open the door. The pilot steps out and breathes in and freezes from the inside out.
Oh my
It's a very
gosh.
morbid way to start the stream,
Yeah.
but that's what it like 7 degrees Fahrenheit. That's what it feels like to me. That I'm going to freeze from the inside out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's when you can start to feel your eyeballs solidifying. It's
Exactly.
problematic.
Exactly.
Ooh. Well, we scared someone away, but that's
I
okay.
mean, that's you run that risk when you talk about the day after tomorrow.
That's true. That's true. But it's not the day after tomorrow. It's today.
It is, in fact, today and
So
today and today.
happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
Right on. Right on. Yeah. So I think we're kind of almost completely done talking about the December coding challenge.
Probably, yeah.
We've gone
I
through
mean,
a lot of them.
we could talk about it ad nauseum, right? There's a lot to dig into. There's
Mhm.
10 different challenges really that we could have run through.
We figured out that I had made a mistake, that I wasn't as right as I thought I was last week. Um, and that was cool. It was kind of interesting to see kind of some digging down really deep into the weeds on filters and filter logic, and some of the kind of interesting nuances of building out those sort of different refinements. Um, and then I think another piece of that was the date picker
Yep.
stuff that we kind of revisited last week. You had kind of figured out some nuances there too,
Yep.
and I think you've got something to show for it, or coming out soon, right?
Yes, there's a blog post. I don't know if it'll be out this week or next week, but it is coming. Chuck just gave me an editing pass on it this morning,
Mm-hmm.
and most of those,
That's how I knew it was coming.
I know. But yeah, most of the edits are in now, and now I just have to get a graphic, and we'll get it live. But it's a fun little rundown of using the at Algolia React date range picker widget, which gives you a nice graphical user interface for date times, which is handy. So that's coming out probably next week, but it's good to go, and that just kind of recaps everything we did on stream, but in an educational flow instead of a wait, I broke things. How do I make this work?
Right.
Next time we'll make it work. Method that we used on stream.
Yeah. There are some nuances to it. It's built on top of an existing date picker that comes in as a dependency.
Yep.
There's some interesting nuances around ways that you can display and store information about time, a lot of
Yep.
things that can kind of get you. So it was kind of nice to see it all laid out as a step by step to get it right the first time.
Yeah, because in much of our documentation, we talk about wanting to store your date times as Unix timestamps, right?
Mhm.
Seconds since the epoch, and that works. And it works for like doing greater than, less than, equal to, all those good operations that you want on math for that. But as it turns out, JavaScript really doesn't like that. JavaScript really wants milliseconds since the epoch, and so you definitely, for most of these packages that are front end packages, you want to be storing these in milliseconds. As it turns out, the concerts data set actually does run milliseconds.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that works out. But depending on where your data is coming from, it may or may not. So you want to make sure to check on that before trying to use it in JavaScript.
Right on. Right on. Cool. So look forward to that blog post coming out soon. I have one in the pipe I'm still working on around geospatial data, doing geosearch. So that should be coming in the near future as well.
Nice.
But what should we talk about today?
Well, it is a new year.
It is a new year.
And it's every year is a chance to learn something new or be excited about something new. So I'm wondering, do you have any aspirations this year, Chuck, for things to learn, things that you're excited about in technology?
Yeah, definitely. So for me, um, a lot of kind of what I have been thinking about, since I came to Algolia in particular, is about data ingestion and sort of how data, aggregates, comes together, especially in large organizations, how it gets pushed out to the right places, how you find the right data.
Yeah.
And I did like one blog post very early on when I came to Algolia. It was a mostly for me. Sometimes you write selfishly,
Oh yeah.
and I kind of went through a lot of different mechanisms for extracting data, moving data into Algolia, surfacing data around GraphQL, around MySQL, around MongoDB. And I really kind of want to drill in a little further, and I want to become more of an expert advisor on sort of mechanisms, where data should go, how data can come into Algolia, how that can benefit you, but more kind of to the point, like across the wider spectrum, like how does data flow through organizations and what's kind of the right place to put it. So that's a big piece of kind of what I want to focus on in 2022. It's really interesting to see, particularly sort of as the large cloud players kind of start fighting it out with themselves, with each other,
Yep.
with open source tools, right? How are those relationships going to play out over time? People are starting to think about like what are the right ways to store data. If everything's going to be behind an API anyway, how does that change things? Is it as important what you put it under? So that's kind of where I am in a big picture. How about
Nice.
you? How about yourself?
Well, I'm a friendly guy by nature, and through that, I've learned to love the ecosystem that we colloquially refer to as the Jam Stack,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's static sites, it's API driven, it's a lot of JavaScript, it's a lot of cool front end stuff. But one of the things that has always frustrated me, um, since like React came out, right? So like we're talking going on a decade now, is that like these front end frameworks, React, Vue, Angular back in the day, Svelte looking forward, all had this promise, right? That it's the view layer, and you can just use it for one little teeny tiny widget on your page, but it doesn't actually in reality come to that often. As soon as you realize you have to have like stateful things and all these things, your app goes from this one little thing that could be a button on a page to taking over the entire page, a single page application. And the modern, what we call meta frameworks, the Nuxts, these solve a lot of that and they make things a lot easier. But what I'm really interested in is how some of these are going from this big idea back into these small islands, and it's what they're calling islands architecture. And I'm very, very passionate about basically systems that allow you to build an entire page and have that served statically, and have a static widget that exists at build time, and then have that one little teeny thing rehydrate, and it's like you can build islands with different rehydration strategies. And the main meta frameworks that are coming out to deal with this are things like Astro.js, very, very new on the scene from a few months ago. Isles, ISLES JS, which is the Vue version of this, and Slinkity, which is built on top of my favorite static site generator, 11D. All of these doing like solving the same problem. So I'm gonna like 2022 is the year I'm going to dig real hard into that. I have fewer search goals than you do, Chuck, and that's because this is my last week at Algolia. I'll be moving to a company called Orbit, and I'll be focusing on community building strategy and talking about how to build developer communities. So my secondary goal is going to be writing along those lines, and writing a little bit more theoretically and less tutorial based content. So more how to do these bigger concepts and less how to use a product. Oh, you're muted, Chuck. USB cable, probably. Let's try that. Nope. I wonder if your USB cable popped. You can always go to your headphone mic if you need to. Nothing yet. Oh, maybe it'll. Oh, okay. So it's just me. How's it going, everybody? So yeah, so I'm very excited to be talking about that sort of thing. Excited to be talking about, like I said, the island's architecture. Chuck will be back here in a minute. But if you're joining us, do let us know in the chat what you're looking to learn in 2022, because it's going to be a big year. A lot of new technology coming out, like I said, especially on the front end. There's a whole bunch of stuff coming down, but as well as on the back end and coming from Algolia as well. Welcome back, Chuck. Is your mic fixed?
I hope so.
Oh, sounds good. Yep.
Great. We switched sides though. It's kind of interesting.
Well, we can fix that.
Bloop. Woohoo!
Because now I get to look this way at my monitor, but it looks like I'm looking towards you.
Right.
Towards you. So exciting times. Yeah.
Very cool. But yeah, so as we were, I don't know what you were saying while I was gone, but right before I left, you were talking about how you're going to be thinking more deeply about DevRel in general. And I'm excited for that because you and I got to kind of do a bit of a deep dive and kind of some soul searching and navel gazing about what we thought about DevRel. And I know that there was a lot of alignment there. So I'm excited for you to take that and spread it wider, because I wholeheartedly agree with it. But of course, that means that I have an additional set of 2020 goals, which are to become a better front-end developer and start to understand a bit more of this ecosystem. So don't be surprised, community, if I'm looking to some of you for some explanations about how all these pieces fit together, because I'm a back-end guy, and I know that there are a lot of tools, and I know that they're very nuanced, and I'm excited to learn how they all fit together.
I will say you should definitely check out, and this goes for anyone listening too, the beta documentation for React. It is excellent. I'm not like Mr. like huge React person, but like their old docs were fine, like they were okay, but they struggled from the idea that from the early days of React it was built one way, and then the modern version with hooks and functional components and all that, like the docs almost had this bifurcation to them. But the beta version, beta.reactjs.org /learn, I'll post that over in chat, is just excellent. It's just very, very good. And I picked up, like, I'm one of those people that I don't deep dive and like have like perfect understanding. I'm not a computer science person. I make things that work. And so I can make React things work. But reading through just the quick start, I picked up like those like little bits of knowledge that connect things together a little bit better. So it was really, really interesting. Like there's actually a whole section on building a reference and use ref. And I actually understood it slightly differently. And reading through that, I was like, oh, I misunderstood that. It actually means this thing over here, which was really, really a great clarifying moment, which I really enjoyed. And like I know like Rachel Neighbors, who was at Microsoft for a little while, did animation stuff for a while. She was instrumental in creating a lot of it. And they did a whole bunch of beta testing around it. So if you're looking to get into like modern front end, like I said, I'm not a huge React person, but like those beta docs are really, really good. And they're not completely finished yet. There are a couple sections that don't have any content yet, but really good what's there.
I love it. I'm definitely going to check it out. And I love to steal ideas for good documentation too. So that's good. Exactly. And I see I've got a brother in arms, as it were, with Ruben. Hey, Ruben, I'm glad to see you here. Our coding challenge winner, I believe.
Yeah.
So welcome. Oh, what do you think about Svelte, Bryan?
I have not used it much, so I don't have that kind of in-depth hands-on thing. But what I like about it is it has all the ideals of shipping the least amount of JavaScript to the browser. And so, it pulls out unused things. It basically strips down to exactly what your code needs to run it in the browser. I think that's amazing. As for the ergonomics and the developer experience, I don't know a lot about it. I know SvelteKit does some cool stuff around it, which is, I think it's very like a Nuxt very like thing. I've got a couple friends who are really into it. It is one of those things that I think is going to be one of the big future languages. It's hard to topple a React. React has so much momentum, but I think it's one of those things that's going to be pretty interesting to look at. And I mentioned before Astro.js, which allows you to use components from all of these in one application, which is really pretty cool. So if you learn Svelte, you learn React, you can use something like Astro as well to use like islands architecture in whatever way you want.
So one of the things that I had been toying with even before was maybe starting a live coding, I don't know, what would you call it? Show maybe.
Yeah.
But just essentially something where I just kind of stumble my way through front end systems one after the other. And it would have been nice to have your expert guidance as part of it, but it's definitely something I could stumble through on my own. So that might be something you see in 2022, either officially through Algolia, or I might kind of just do it on my own, since I'm not burning Algolia's time to learn new technologies. But that could be a fun thing to do. So look forward to that in 2022. I think it's really interesting as an old man of tech.
Back in my day,
who, like worked for companies that had AS400s and, mid-tier, not supercomputers, but definitely like lots and lots of green screen terminals and things like that. And seeing sort of that transition over to like Windows for Workgroups and Windows and all of these things. And just seeing sort of that cycle of like, do it on the client, do it on the server, applications, centralized, right? Just to see that kind of repeat in a more accelerated fashion over and over again, sort of as we move into these new eras, right? Like, because the last time, just to date myself, the last time I was really into front end, I was kind of learning Ajax and learning like, Ruby on Rails stuff. And it was kind of interesting to see like, no, you can have components updating on the client side without having to re-render them on the back end. And that's super cool. Yeah. And like now we're kind of in the opposite, where it feels like we pushed a lot onto the client side. Now we're like, maybe it makes more sense to pull some of that back up to the server. Right.
Yeah.
So
I really enjoy looking back at the evolution of the web in general. And one of the things I really enjoy when I talk about the Jamstack specifically, and like the idea of serverless, right, is I remember, to date myself, a little younger, but not significantly. I remember building websites and putting a counter on my website. And back then I didn't know anything about what I was doing. This is like young Bryan making his HTML website in a Microsoft front page, right? And there's this concept of the CGI bin, right? And the folder that you put these little scripts in that could do these dynamic things. And you didn't have to have like this big idea of all these things running, because it was just this one folder in whatever host you were using back then. I don't even remember who we used back then. But like, what is a serverless function if not one of these functions, right? If not basically the modern version of your CGI bin directory.
Right. Without that little box sitting on a shelf in some colo space that you can go wave at occasionally and, do an RPM update on or something. So
I had no clue how any of that worked back then, though. Like nowadays, I understand the basic structure of what's happening on serverless functions. Back then, I was like, nope. Like I can copy this from this hopefully reputable website. We'll see.
So it's interesting that you bring up like counters, because I kind of got down a rabbit hole the other day. A gentleman named I'm going to slaughter your name, but Jacob is definitely your first name, but I think your last name is Andruski. Andrzejewski.
Yep.
And I apologize if I slaughtered that, but he has been playing around with building out some components, some Nuxt components for using Algolia search, essentially wrappers for composability. And, this is a lot of new language to me. So I'm learning about composables and composition and Vue and Nuxt and sort of the differences between them. And Bryan helped me out with this a little bit, like kind of understanding about sort of Vue building out, components. I'm not sure exactly what they're called within the Vue world, but essentially pieces that live on the client side. And then Nuxt or Next in the, I guess in the React world.
In the React world, yeah.
Helping with sort of routing and sort of bringing this stuff back up to the server and being able to generate stuff statically. And again, that's client server thing that we were just talking about. But so I was reading about composition and sort of some of the nuances. Essentially, Vue has its own concept of composition. And then Nuxt has a concept of composition, and they're not actually aligned with each other because one makes assumptions about everything being on the client side, and then the Nuxt version has to be able to understand what's living on the client and what's living on the server. And hopefully I'm representing this well.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, cool. And so it's kind of cool because they were showing sort of the differences between essentially like having a counter function. And one of the things that they were talking about is the difference between composables and mix-ins.
Sure. Yeah.
And kind of talking about this concept of like a centralized global piece versus instances, right? Essentially, for lack of a better word, and essentially talking about like a counter in sort of the way they sort of represented the differences, a counter where when you put that counter on your page, it starts at 0 and it increments, versus a counter where regardless of what page it's on, it's a consistent number and it increments for all the pages together as an aggregate, and kind of the differences between those two. And it was really helping me sort of understand that nuance of sort of being able to take that information, push it back up to the server, and normalize it across multiple components, multiple pages, multiple pieces of your application, I suppose.
Yeah. And really that could be, pseudo session based as opposed to like a database, right? And so that like that, Nuxt and Next very, very much iron out those issues for you. Super handy to have these meta frameworks available on top of these already existing frameworks. It's that meta layer, right?
Right.
So yeah,
and then I
definitely.
assume, and then you get into things like React Native, where you're starting to think about decoupling so that you could have that counter locally and then push that back up when you actually get a connection back up to the server, right?
Yep. Yeah. PWAs and actual applications all served from the same code base. Using the same code base to do multiple things is such a mind bender, right? Like it's so important. Like it means write it once, put it wherever you want. But you have to think about all the places it could go. If you're just in the web ecosystem, it's way easier to think about. But okay, well, it's got to run as a PWA, so it has to have like a local DB instance, maybe an index DB or local storage, and then that has to then sync up with the database, so it can be a lot to think about.
And then that kind of ties back into the blog post you wrote before the holidays around essentially like search fallbacks.
Yeah.
Right. For when you're disconnected from the server side integration with Algolia, so that you can still have like a fallback where you can actually still serve up some sort of result. Right.
Yep. Yeah. Have that come through no matter what, because JavaScript may not be available in whatever it's running in. You got to make sure you can run it wherever.
But the particular thing that Jacob was writing about was obviously we have an instant search for Vue, and it works nicely. It's got all the components and stuff, but it's very Vue centric. And Jacob's been building out some e-commerce stuff on his side that relies on, or is built against Nuxt 3, which I think is still in beta. I could be wrong. Maybe it's out. I don't know that environment as well. We'll have to figure that out. But discovered some nuances there around, what do you see in here?
Beta, yeah. V3's in beta still.
Oh, speaking of which, I need to share a screen. So I guess we could be showing some stuff. And actually, why don't I share the blog post that I was talking about too? I'll drop that in the chat here.
I can pull it up on my screen for the moment.
But there's some nuances to doing this within a Nuxt environment, right? Where you actually have that ability to leverage the server side and some of the build time stuff that Nuxt can do. And so Jacob's kind of been going through and building out some components here around actually building out an instant search or a wrapper for the JavaScript libraries that you can use as a Nuxt component, as a composable. And so it's kind of cool. He's got kind of a step-by-step guide here. It's bare minimum, right? It's really just the ability to do a search and grab the results back. But I thought it was kind of fun. It was a nice sort of, when you've got this entire ocean of front end in front of you, it's like, oh, where do I start drinking? This seemed like a good place to start learning a few concepts.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the idea on all of it, and like React calls it something completely different, right? Like this sort of semi idea is, hooks in React in a lot of ways. They're different, but that's like the non-technical answer there. But like the idea that you can pull out a result and the search method, and then you display the result, and then anytime that search method gets called, with a new query or new parameters or new options, you can then have that update on the fly in the client without having to instantiate anything is pretty powerful. Granted, you still probably want to be using instant search. And I think in this blog post, he actually talks about later, like one of the next steps is going to be to integrate with Vue instant search. So it can be a little bit of both, which I think is powerful as well.
Yeah, and I've been chatting with Jacob a little bit over Twitter, and he's definitely kind of starting to pursue that piece too. He was very emphatic about, this is really just a way to sort of make sure that search is working well in the Nuxt framework, and that you'll still want sort of a better way to interact with it. This is literally doing a static search right here.
Yeah. Yeah, as you can see, await search, and then it just passes the query in. I believe the entire configuration object can go in there. Any of the options you can pass to the Algolia search library, you can pass in here as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think he's got an even more abstracted component that literally is just a wrapper for the entire JavaScript library itself or module, just called, like, instead of, because this is what is it doing? Let's see. Yeah, use search. I think he's got to use Algolia as well. That's even more abstracted. If you click down through the repository.
Yeah. Is this it?
There's actually here. He sent me a better one. Let me send.
Okay.
Let me get you a better link to the. Because I think he's been sort of noodling on his own, but this is put it in the chat here. Check that one.
GitHub.com. Oh, that's right. Next Commerce. I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see.
So I think there's a use Algolia in there as well. I could be wrong.
No, I remember there's probably the documentation. I remember. See, yeah, here it is. Yeah, this is actually. Let's put this in chat as well. There's multiple pieces that you can use. There is the use Algolia. And there is use search and use index for initializing the index as well. Which, again, these are things that will be useful when it comes time to integrate that with Vue instant search, I believe.
Right. So. Yeah, because I think, like, the use search has the index initialization sort of baked into it.
Yep.
But that only helps you if you're actually just going to throw queries directly at it. So it doesn't really help you with, like, the widgets that are going to be doing refinements and things like that, I suppose.
Yeah. So do we want to dig into this? Do we want to go ahead and maybe build a version of it?
Yeah, all I've got to do is drink coffee and hang out with you one last time, Bryan. So let's do it.
I'm all out of coffee.
Kind of am, actually.
Oh, boo. I'm out of tea, but that's fine. So we'll start, and this is just inside of Jacob's blog post here on Dev2, again posted over in chat. But we're going to use the Nuxt package, and that's going to initialize an empty Nuxt 3 project. If you use create Nuxt app, it's going to give you a Nuxt 2. I've done this before.
While Bryan's getting the initial setup there, we're choosing this to work on just because it's something interesting that we picked up this week. But we could just as easily talk about anything you want to talk about. So feel free to drop questions in the chat, ask us about, not just about, Nuxt or what we're working on right now, but just anything around search, honestly.
Yeah, no doubt. Or, in tech in general, right? Like we're here to help in whatever way. Like we talked about Svelte earlier, even though it's apropos of nothing, right?
Yeah.
So all we've done is we've moved into the directory that was created by the Nuxt command. I ran npm install. I'm going to then open this directory inside VS Code, and we'll run the server in there. Cool. In fact, I might go ahead and just run that right now.
And as I was mentioning yesterday, I'm always impressed with the CLI UIs of front-end tools. I feel like they just always are. Look at all those little emojis and nice spacing and good status bars. Yeah.
All right.
I feel like if you get like one of those rotating cursors with the slashes, that's good on a back-end tool.
Yeah, that's all people need for CLI on the back end. All right, so yeah, we're just going to run npm start, I believe, on this, and we should
Did you do npm install yet?
I thought I did. Dev.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, npm run dev. There we go. All right. So this is going to spin up a server at localhost 3000. Although it was at 4,000 when I built this yesterday, so we'll see how that goes.
I think we had a couple things running yesterday when we were playing.
That's fair. And you can see this is like a very like static, standard Nuxt.js installation. Not a whole lot going on. We have an app.view and an index page, which correspond to app.view here, which is just a small template, and our
is there an index?
There is not. I feel lied to.
Is it under the .nuxt maybe? I don't know.
No, that's the build on the server.
Stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, this is this might be, it's pulling from his template. If you see the command that we ran, no, it's not pulling. Anyway, just gonna make stuff up as I go. So yeah, so we run that, we get all of this, which is, you know, ready to go. There's no index page, but there is an app. We run install, run dev, we get this up, and then we need to create an Algolia account. We're not going to create an Algolia account. We are just going to go to my Algolia account and grab some information for use.
The differences of being the Algolia DevRel who's jumping into the Nuxt world as opposed to the other way around.
Exactly.
Lots of indices here.
Lots and lots. But we're going to need API keys. These are all public. All the ones in here, other than this one, are fine. And that one's all blurred out. So we need our API key and our application ID. And we're going to put that inside of our configuration. Oh, after we install the Algolia Nuxt 3 package. So let's open up a new terminal here, and we're going to run npm install that. While that builds, we'll go ahead and grab this. This is our Nuxt configuration. It's basically going to have build modules here. It's going to set up the Nuxt Commerce Algolia module inside of this. It'll make it so that we can use this module without importing in any of our files, which is a handy thing to have happen for us. A little developer ergonomics never hurt anybody, I hear. So that's going to become, this is a blank Nuxt config file. So I'm just going to overwrite it, and it's going to have our API key and our application ID. So we need to grab those out of our API keys. So here's our application ID. Goes in right here. And our search key. This is the search only key. You hooligans watching can't come in and add anything to my account at this point. All right, that rebuilds. But exactly. So that does that. And then the next step is going to be to actually use this. And so after that, in our app.view, that main app file, we currently only have a template. So we're actually going to create a setup script as well. So I'm just going to copy this, and we're going to make some changes to it as we go. But we have app.view, currently just this template. We're going to have our setup script. It's going to run that use search, and we're going to give it the index that we want. I think I've got the TED Talks in this one as a talks index, and that's from our GitHub datasets repository. And then again, this result is a live updating computed value, I believe is what Vue is going to call that. And the search is the search method that we can then use when it mounts. So when it mounts, we can do a simple search on that. And then we can display our results here. So results, and let's get rid of Nuxt welcome for now. Save that, and we should have some JavaScript, but there's no Samsung, right? Samsung isn't in the TED Talks. So we could search, as Chuck and I found out, there is a liar inside of the TED Talks database.
We don't want to change the database though. Yeah, we want to change not the index.
Exactly.
I don't want to make you a liar.
Appreciate it. And there is all of the TED Talks searched by liar and then output as JSON here. So let's quickly toss this.
And according to the blog post, according to Jacob, that search, the results would be technically a reactive computed value.
Yes, that sounds like something.
Reactive computed value. I like that.
I'm just going to make this so it's a little bit smaller.
Cool. All right, that's a little bit more readable.
Yep. So now if we wanted to, because result is computed on the fly, it's reactively computed on the fly, right? We could create some buttons to have it react to the buttons and compute the value of result.
I've heard the best way to retain something is to use it 3 times, right?
Over and over. I don't know about 3 times, but I do know about as many times as you can, at least for my brain.
Yep.
So yeah, so we can create maybe an on-click function that can, when a button is clicked, pass the value of that button into a function that will update the result. So in our script setup, we can actually, I think, do this in just a regular script, but I'm not comfortable enough with Vue to say that for certain. So I'm going to go ahead and have it just be in this. We're going to set up a callback function pretty much. So const on search click. It's going to be an async function because we want to fetch it kind of on the fly. It's going to have an event that comes from the click.
Okay.
Wow, it's really working overtime for me. I don't want any of that.
Is this your Copilot?
It's Copilot. Copilot is usually pretty good, but I want none of what it's giving me right now. I do want const value is going to equal e.target, but I don't want the rest of this stuff. I mean, I could do all that, but
Wait, search.
I don't. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to fire that search function. I'm going to pass it, again, an object for our configuration for our search. I'm just going to have it be, the query is going to be the value that we just got from our click. And then we can create a button in our UI that will change this on the fly. So we'll have a button that will have an on, a V on, what is it?
Yeah.
Again, yeah.
V on. It was V dash on. Yeah.
Click.
Right.
And then that's going to take a string of the function name that we want. So on search click, and then a value. And we'll have this one be, what's another one? Something about being wrong, right?
Yeah. I was definitely wrong last week. Be wrong button.
Yep.
The wrong button. I love it.
And then we need to close our button. And so we'll leave, actually what we could do is we could have our initial state, right? Our on-mounted state be a blank query, return everything in the order that Algolia's configuration wants it to be set up in. And then we could have an on wrong button and an on liar button.
Yeah.
Right. So liar button. So now when we click those buttons, so you can see this is what happens when you reply a spam email. So that's just, I think it's in this data set sorted maybe a little bit by like most watched. And this James Veitch one has a lot.
Yeah.
James Veitch has a lot. But now when we click be wrong, everything you think you know about addiction is wrong. Okay, sure. I'm sure there's another one that's wrong in some way. Why you think you're right, even if you're wrong, which was
the one that came up last week.
The wrong answer to a question.
I think it was the right answer because I was a liar.
Right. That's right. That's right. And then we can click the liar button and we can have it sort again on the fly. And we get how to spot a liar as the top result here. And that's all just by like firing this one method. And that method is set up to basically watch, or the result is set up to watch for that method to be called. And when it gets called, it updates in the UI on the fly.
So you could plug that into like filter categories or any number of different things and have that kind of come up here.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that you can do inside of like Instant Search JS. But Instant Search JS is a workhorse, right? It's got everything that you need. And maybe sometimes you want something a little bit smaller. Obviously, you'd have to come in and create some sort of component to look nice. But the data is all here. And so you could just as easily have that pipe through to a component that will make it look nice. And like we said, Jacob's working towards Instant Search as well.
Yeah, this is Jacob definitely points out at the end that he's like, yes, we know the next step would be to have those widgets and to have those kind of UI components. And I think we're going to be seeing some follow-up on that from him. But was really excited about this. Definitely want to kind of keep an eye on what Jacob's up to over there, particularly because we don't do a lot about Nuxt. We don't talk about Vue a lot. Would definitely be interested to hear from you all. Is this a space that you're working in? Is this a space that we should be doing more content around? We kind of default to React. We kind of default to Next.js. We kind of default to kind of the stuff that we like, stuff that we know that folks out there are kind of chatting about actively. But understand that there are just a lot of different ecosystems out there and a lot of different places people are working. And we certainly want to make sure that we're providing good content to anyone out there, depending on how you're using Algolia.
Yeah, exactly.
So hit us up, let us know, either here on YouTube, on Twitter. Let us know what kind of content you're looking for in 2022. What sort of things, maybe I'll get like a pillow with Bryan's picture on it, and we can just I'll talk to the pillow for the rest of the year, but it'll be nice, and I'll hug it occasionally. So, which is not creepy at all.
Not at all. Not in the least. I did want to point out, Chuck. So we've been doing this dance for a while, but you did not change today.
No.
And almost as a celebration, right? We're on the same page.
We are. We are. It's amazing. So, yeah, for those, if you haven't watched the previous ones, first of all, go back and watch them now because they're all delightful and interesting and insightful.
If we do say it to ourselves, right?
Yeah. But also, yeah, we've been having this fight for weeks now where it's not a fight, but it's like a miscommunication, a stumble where we can't seem to get our names and Twitter handles in the right order. And now we finally have one last time.
Just in time. Let's do this thing one more time.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm trying to think what other things we could be chit-chatting about this week. Yeah. It's so funny. We were last year, I feel like we would always spill about 15 minutes over, and I feel like this year we've been super concise.
I feel like we've been doing these actual bits of live coding that we've been semi-prepared for. Although like last week, as we were working towards things, we're like, oh, why isn't this working as expected? But the answers have been pretty self-contained, I think. So yeah, I think that's been the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to be playing with some geo stuff. The struggle that I'm going through is this is a question that's come up a few times, and I've been dying to figure out a good answer for it, which is so Algolia supports geocoded data. So you can put location information, latitude and longitude information into your search records, and you can actually layer that into a Google Map, Open Maps, any sort of API. You can put this data on top of it as long as it's got good geodata, and you can do, distance from, radiuses. You can build polygons, the whole 9 yards. You can actually do all of that using Algolia APIs, which is cool. But the challenge becomes, what if some of your data lives at a very location specific, lives very location specific, but then some of it is more abstract, right? So you're looking for specific, maybe storefronts, but there's also sort of a statewide agency, or there's a federal agency. And how do you layer that stuff on top of each other? It's questions come up a few times, and I want to kind of come up with a good answer, some good strategies around how do you put that stuff on top of each other, so you can kind of make sure that you're giving your end user good data, not just for what's something that's geographically close, but also sort of the larger, maybe more abstract organizations that are available to them, depending on what your data is. So that's something I'll probably be playing with, stumbling upon on my own next week. And I'm trying to think what other kind of interesting stuff we've got coming up down the way. There were some interesting things, some questions around sort of building more nuanced refinements. Folks that have kind of are coming to Algolia from places where you have an opportunity to have a more structured data, maybe GraphQL style, or like a document store where you can sort of be 2 or 3 layers deep with attributes. And it can be challenging to think about that in the more sort of flattened context of an index. And there's some nuances to kind of going from one to the other. So I definitely want to play around with that a little bit as well. That's going to be something you're going to see this year as well.
Nice.
Cool.
Exciting things for 2022.
Yeah. Well, Bryan, We're gonna miss you, that's for sure.
I'm gonna miss the Algolia company, product, and community.
Yep. For those that don't know, Bryan, he does some. I think it's more of a podcast around the Jamstack,
I
right?
do.
Called "That's My Jamstack,"
Mm-hmm.
and I think you've got some of those coming out this year. Which
we've had 2 episodes so far this year, and there's 3 more coming in the next few weeks. One should launch late tonight, promoted tomorrow. It's actually a friend of Algolia is going to be on this next one, Raymond Camden. He was actually the second guest that I had about 4 years ago. And so he came on for a That's My Jamstack remix. And so we chat about all sorts of things, modern Jamstack at this point.
That's cool. Yeah. For those that want to see what it's like to sort of live in the Algolia ecosystem for a long time with a decent amount of data, Raymond's done a great kind of like, I don't know if it was an intentionally recurring series, but every now and then he sort of touches on this is what it's like to sort of live with a live index, right? He's using Algolia against his blog content. And so, as the content has grown over the years, he's sort of had to change his strategies around how he maintains that index, how data kind of goes into it, how it keeps up to date. And, it's kind of nice because we come in and, we blow through these things and we're like, everything works fine, because then we just sort of like, gzip it at the end and archive it and move on to the next thing.
With our lives. Yeah.
But this is really kind of nice sort of documentation of how his relationship to Algolia has evolved over the years and the strategies that he's come up with. So highly encourage that too. I'm interested to see if he touches on any of that with you. I guess we'll have to find out.
He does not actually. But there's a link to his site in general, raymondcamden.com. Cool. He's been writing about static sites for a long time, and he writes about 1 blog post a week. A very impressive cadence for what he's got. I actually met him for the first time 6 years ago at a conference in Atlanta, and he had the presentation right before mine in the room that I was in, and it was about it was right as I was getting into static sites, and he had this thing about making static sites less static. And I was like, okay, I'll watch this. And it's amazing thinking back to that. It was all use stuff like Discuss, use stuff like here's some services that you can use that are just these huge JavaScript embeds on your page. And now how the ecosystem has changed in all that time, it's very different. And if you were to give that presentation now, I think there'd be 10% of the same content.
Yeah. I love all that stuff. I had made a page for a band I was in. This would have been 12 years ago, maybe.
Nice. Yeah.
And it was literally, I was writing HTML, but I was writing HTML that was calling out and pulling in pieces from the Twitter API for most recent tweets. And I can't even remember what we were using, but all the Tor information was coming in from another site, and then embedded media players, right? And it was just, it was fun, but it was definitely you were swimming upstream a little bit back then to do that stuff. It's kind of cool to see that composability become the mainstream and the way to do things now.
And I really I look back at the way I've done stuff, right? And it's a very interesting thought process that I've had to go through. I remember, so I was working at news companies, right? I was part of the UX team for 13 newspapers, huge readership, all this stuff. And we worked in Django. And so when the inevitable happened and layoffs came down the pipe, I was like, all right, I'm going to build my portfolio site so I can go find a job and all that. I'm going to build it in Django. And I'm a front ender, right? And I absolutely fell in love with Django's templating engine, Jinja 2. Amazing awesome, templating engine. Really love it. That's why I use Nunjux in the 11D. That's why when I was in PHP afterward, I convinced my company to use Twig. They're all Jinja 2 based.
Yep.
Or at least Jinja 2 like.
Yeah.
And so I wrote it in Django. I had no clue what I was doing. I'd never written anything other than templating in Django. Made it work. A year and a half later, couldn't make my server run anymore. Made an HTML page for my portfolio. Then I was like, I need to learn React. And so I made a weird React search that pulled in API data from whatever Adobe's thing was. Adobe had a portfolio system that you could use, and it had an API that spat out JSON. and like did that. And I was like, this is okay. And then I discovered Jekyll, and I was like, all right, Jekyll, this is what I'm going to do. And then 11D, and like, yeah, I don't know. It's just really interesting to like.
And now just 11D
feel that.
forever because it's beautiful and
11D forever, man.
Right.
11D
right.
forever. Just 1.0. You know, they say never push to production on a Friday, right?
Mhm.
Zach Leatherman subscribes to that. He did not push the 1.0 release to production on Friday. He did it on Saturday. So this past Saturday is actually when 1.0 came out. I'm very excited about that because 11D is very much my jam.
That's
I've written
awesome.
a few blog posts about the 1.0 release, including one for Algolia for doing the serverless search.
Serverless. Yeah, which was super cool. Well, I know I, for one, am going to be excited to continue reading blog posts from you and listening to your podcasts, and
Appreciate it.
and definitely have appreciated everything I've learned doing these live coding sessions with you and everything else. I get Bryan for another few days, thankfully, in our little virtual office. But from all of our listeners and viewers, I'm going to say that we're going to miss you.
I'm going to miss every one of you as well.
Right on.
Yep.
Well, I will be back next Tuesday. Probably a little bit quieter, but we'll be stumbling through something, I'm sure. And we'll be talking a little bit about all of the interesting things in the Algolia ecosystem. So hope to see some of you back next week. And we'll talk to you on Twitter and other places in the meantime.
Absolutely.
So take care, everyone.